When I start building a new application, I have to think about, do I need a backend or not? These are the 3 points I consider when deciding if I need to build a backend. Available resources, either on the client or on your server. The next one is timing. How long can your code run? And the last point is security. If you have intensive operations, you have to decide if the client is powerful enough to run those. The client means the user's mobile device or the user's browser on their computer. On a backend, you can decide how much resources you have. You can scale it up. You can't scale up the client side. Reduce processing time. If you want to have a good user experience, some tasks shouldn't run too long. If you have long-running tasks, put them on the backend to be able to reduce the processing time. When you develop for mobile devices, you need to consider the battery consumption. In general, the more intensive the tasks, the more battery it will consume. And this will also go into your store rating. When you have long tasks, run them on the back end. The client triggers these tasks and gets informed when the task is done. Also, tasks that mustn't be cancelled by the client must run on your back end. If the client closes the app before the task is processed, you might end up with inconsistencies. So if you have crucial operations that mustn't be cancelled, put them on your back end, because then they can continue running even when the client closes its browser or the app. And of course, tasks that are not triggered by the client have to run on your server. If it's a newsletter you send out or stuff like that, these need to run with a cron job or other things on your backend. The major point here are API keys. When you have API keys in your coding, you do not want to put them in your client app. The client coding is public. It's more or less readable, but there's always the option to find out what API keys you have in your coding. Also, if you have confidential coding, you want to put it on your backend and not share it with your client. Start without building a backend, unless you already know in the beginning that some of these points apply. Then you can set up a backend and put the processes there. If none of the points apply, start without a backend, and once you are confronted with a reason to build a backend, build it as small as possible. It's always harder to maintain when you have 2 code bases that are very big than when you have only 1 code base. And it's also easier to test when you only have client coding in 1 language, 1 process you need to run, and not 2 processes you always have to start and update separately.